Hey Greg, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Was this one pretty smooth logging on?
Yes, yeah, it was. Yeah.
All right, well listen, thanks for joining us. I know you're out in the West Coast, so it's still kind of early, but anyway, welcome. I'm going to do a brief introduction just while everyone's logging on, if that's all right.
Sure.
So we're lucky to have Greg Shepard today. He's clearly one of the most experienced and accomplished investors and entrepreneurs in the world. I know he probably gets shy with me saying that, but he absolutely is. CEO and founder of Boss Capital Partners. He's a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, Forbes author, and keynote speaker. Greg is a 20-year startup veteran and serial entrepreneur with 14 liquidity events under his belt, 2 of which were sold for nearly $1 billion and won 4 private equity awards. He's a Forbes book author and has written over 100 articles in 25 national and international journals. He's also a TEDx speaker and keynote speaker for multiple universities, associations, and conferences worldwide. He's a host of Forbes Radio show and has been featured as a guest on over 25 popular podcasts, as well as numerous TV and radio shows. He also founded Boss Capital Partners, a global syndicate for investing in tech startups worldwide. He co-founded BOSSStartupScience, which is a learning center based on business operating support systems, which empowers entrepreneurs while increasing startup success rate. And we're here to discuss the ever elusive secret to startup companies. It's a very important topic, obviously, as startups account for a large part of the U.S. economy. So again, Greg, thank you for joining us, and really looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm humbled. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Well, listen, just to start with the basics here, because not everyone is a business person on this podcast, but what exactly in your mind constitutes a startup company?
So I classify businesses in order to understand the startup ecosystem. I classify startups as pre-startup and startup. So pre-startup is before revenue and startup is after revenue. So even $1 of revenue, you're not a startup until you have $1 of revenue. That means that you've verified and validified your customer. So any business there, well, actually, to answer your question, there are 2 types, right? So there's a lifestyle startup and then there's growth startup. A lifestyle startup is, let's say you're trying to start a restaurant or a dental practice or a bar or something like that. And then on the other side, you have your growth startups. And this is where you're taking venture capital money on or private equity money on in order to grow and exit. And that's how you repay back to the investors. So that's how I classify startups.
Those 2. Now, the next question is, everyone has, ideas of grandiose, and everyone has wonderful ideas that they think are going to be very successful. What makes a dream a reality? What makes an idea profitable and something they should pursue?
The first thing I do is I tell people to go through what I call the North Star. And the North Star has a few different segments that are really important. The first one is to understand what your what is. So what is your business? And that's description, feature, and benefit. And the second thing is why should somebody buy your business and your product? And that's problem, solution, and impact. And then who, and the who is made up of 2 pieces also, or 2 pieces in this scenario. And one of them is to identify the who is going to buy your business, which is an ideal acquirer profile. And the other one is an ideal customer profile. And this is a very fragile area because a lot of people raise capital to build a growth company and they don't actually think about who's going to be buying that company down the line. The reason why this is so important, and the reason why the majority, so 40% of entrepreneurs fail at the tail end, 50% fail within the first year, and the rest fail within the following 3 years. And those ones, the majority of them fail because of something that has to do with losing investor confidence. So as an example, if you say that your business right now is worth $1 million, you may be thinking as an entrepreneur, my company's worth $1 million. But what you don't understand is that your investors actually want 5 times that. So the investors are actually pricing it at $5 million. So it's very easy to make the mistake of overvaluing your company by thinking that you need to have a big value in the beginning to hold on to your company because the valuation is so low and dilution is so high. So that's one example. If you don't understand how much your business is going to sell for, with an ideal acquirer profile, then it's easy to outprice yourself. Let's say that you figure out that somebody buying your business has the behavior, you go into Crunchbase and do some research, and you see that the people that are interested in buying, the businesses that are interested in buying your businesses are actually buying businesses for 50 million, 25 million, and that's their behavior pattern. And maybe they buy a business every year, every 3 years, something like that. So you get an idea of that, and then you prevent yourself from getting in the space where an ideal acquirer's budget to purchase a business, or their behavior pattern to purchase a business, is actually less than what you have already priced your business. So because that makes you overvalued, people stop investing, and then you lose investor confidence, and then you go out of business. That's one example. Another example is you also want to make sure that the ideal acquirer is the same. A lot of businesses raise capital, and then over a long period of time, they don't realize that their ideal acquirer has an ICP, an ideal customer profile. And the acquirers buy companies to sell more products to the existing customers. So a synergy is made up of either save money or make money. The majority of the time it's make money. So if you're building a business and you don't have an ideal customer profile from the very beginning, you could build your business for 5 years and then go to try to sell it, and the acquirer is saying, oh, no, it doesn't match my ideal customer profile, so we're not interested. Why? Well, if you are a business that has 50,000 customers and you're acquiring another business that has 10,000 customers or 5,000 customers or even less, hundreds of customers, you're buying them because you have already absorbed the customer acquisition cost associated with getting those customers. I mean, you paid for them. So where you make money now is through growing the lifetime value. And the way that you measure that is the customer acquisition cost to lifetime value ratio. So if you haven't matched your ideal customer profile with your buyers from the very beginning, you could have spent all this time building the wrong customer and not have an exit. In the end, same result. So the North Star, what it does is it makes you identify what you are, what your product is, who you're selling your business to, who you're selling your products to, why they would want to buy your business or your product. And then finally, you put together your when. So when would you sell the business and how much are you going to sell it for? Now, I get into arguments with investors all the time over this, but logically, the algorithm makes sense. If you don't take this path, you're leaving so many question marks and big question marks on the table that the probability of you just happening to run across a scenario where the shoe fits the foot is very rare. So I think that whenever people ask me that question, I go, that's the first step, is to make sure that you identify these elements before you do anything else, because those things guide everything you do moving forward.
Now, you're talking about when the right time to sell is. That's obviously a very tough trigger to pull, right? I mean, let's say your company is gaining value. How do you know you're not selling too soon? What's the right time to sell? What do you advise?
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. So if you look at the growth curve, it's sort of like a bell curve, right? And the acquirer of your business wants to know where they want to buy this business down on the growth curve, but where it's safe. So they have that long tail coming up and over on the backside, right? So they have that climb. But the entrepreneur always wants to sell really high. And so there's a problem with when to sell. And you noted that. Now, the problem is misunderstood. The problem is knowing where to sell. That is not the problem. The real problem is knowing where you are. So a lot of people, it doesn't matter if you don't know where you are, you could think you're somewhere where you're not. So I put together a life cycle, which goes from pre-startup all the way to exit, right? And each individual stage has a validation point that goes through these different stages. So you have pre-seed, seed, series seed, A and B round, and C sometimes, or you exit. The timeline should be about 5 years. The reason why is because the 90% failure rate kicks in around 5 years. This is when if you can survive 5 years, you're in good shape. Typically, you want to sell in about 3 to 4 years, which means it gives you 2 years to start up, and it gives you 1 to 2 years to grow, and then that's a sweet spot to sell it for. A lot of people will hold on to the business trying to grow valuation on the top line growth, not understanding that the value drivers of growth, margin, and retention depend on the buyer. So going back to that North Star, if you understand the buyer, you understand what they're buying you on, so that you can adjust your company to the needs of that specific buyer. So if they want top line growth, then you want to take away from the margin and grow the business. If they want retention, then you want to show deep retention, like 95% retention. And if they want bottom line, then you're going to squeeze the top line and you're going to squeeze retention and you're going to spit money down to the bottom line. So understanding that is really critical. And then once you have your formulas right, that's when it's time to sell. So you can say approximately, you want to sell within 5 years from the time that you start the business. You want to sell within 3 years from the series seed, which is 3 rounds in. And then you want to make sure more than anything, more than time or anything, that the value drivers are meeting what the buyer wants. So do they want growth, margin, retention? Which one is the priority and what are the numbers? So typically they'll say 20% growth, 90% retention, and 15 to 20% to the bottom line.
Yeah, see, and you're talking about so much planning, which is great to hear, but how often do you see people fall into, what are called passion traps? They have an idea, they're super passionate about it, they love the idea, but they haven't planned the economic and the fiscal plans, and it just falls flat on its face.
All the time. I mean, all the time. So you have, when I studied, so I had a team of 5 people studying why entrepreneurs fail for 5 years. We did like 120,000, surveys and 1,200 in-person interviews. And I mean, it was a whole thing, right? Thousands of articles. And the data shows that 50% fail within the first 12 months. 50%, right? So, I mean, 90% overall, right? So you have a 10% chance of succeeding. If you brush out all of the people that come in with an idea, and they're in love with their idea instead of the outcome of their idea, a lot of those people will fail because they don't recognize the signs, right? You don't recognize, well, the customers really don't like your product the way it is, and so on and so forth. Most people can pivot and save their business. The key to that is making sure that you understand your customer like you can't even imagine. You should know your customer like you know your sibling. Where do they eat? What do they do? What TV shows do you? I mean, you need to know them. That's the persona. You need to know them so well that you understand how to position your product in front of them and in a way that resonates with them.
So that's super interesting what you're talking about, knowing your customer. Talk about the difference between staying true to your vision, right? You have a goal. You came into the business. You want to have product X. This is what your dream is about. That's one side. And then the ability to be adaptable and versatile depending on the market, which can change, as you know, often. How flexible and adaptable do you have to be in order to be successful versus staying true to your initial goal?
Well, so there's 2 types of businesses. There are businesses that save money and there's businesses that make money. So a bull market business, you were talking about economic conditions, a bull market business is a make money business. And a bear market business is a save money business. Now, why would that be? Because nobody in a bear market is spending money. So you can't go to people and say, hey, make money. And they're like, look, man, I'm just trying to save money right now. I'm not interested in making money. Whereas in a bull market, the money's flowing, right? When the money is flowing, then you say, oh, I'm going to increase your revenue. So aligning the way that you pitch your business to the market conditions are important, even if your business doesn't align that way. So we had portfolio companies that were make money type bull market businesses before COVID, and we just changed the narrative. We changed the narrative around, instead of make money by using this software, to save money because this software is less expensive than the stuff you're using. So you can take, you know what I mean? You can change the narrative to fit the market. So there's that piece of it, right? And then there's understanding the customer, right? The market is the customer. Right. So the customer in a bull market or a bear market, the customer instinctively has things because they're surrounded by media, right? They're surrounded by things that the stock market's going down and blah, 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 blah. The same thing that creates these ebb and flows in the stock market are signs of people's intellectual, state, right? So you can either go against that and try to sell somebody something when they're not buying things, or try to save them money by selling something that in the end saves them money. So it's really important to understand your customer. That true understanding will tell you the market conditions, and then you can align the circle of influence around your circle of control,
So talking about markets and being adaptable, just like you were talking about, it sounds like you're saying startups need to have a 5-year life cycle. Is that what you tell people? Is that it's really not a long-term investment. It's more of a short-term.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the reason why is because the longer you hold on to the company, the greater the chance that you are going to end up in some form of failure. And the reason why is because the longer you hold on to a company, the more time you have to invest into growth. The more time you have to invest into growth, the more money you have to onboard. The more money you onboard, the higher the dilution. And then you go back to the beginning, I got to raise more money, and you get caught in this circle. And a lot of them get caught in this circle, and they eventually get themselves outpriced. And what you've seen that a lot of these companies, it used to be that the stock market was the place to go when you needed money, right? You needed money, you go to the stock market, you raise capital, and that's how you pay for growth. But we've seen that change since the 2008 recession, the dot bomb before that, where now it's like you have to go to the stock market profitable. So if you think that the stock market is the place for you to go because there's a bunch of small shareholders and not big investors that aren't as savvy, basically taking advantage of the small investors, you're going to figure out really quick how much your business is worth. And this is what we've seen with Airbnb and all these companies, right? They come on, they try to raise money. The individual shareholders look at it and they go, this company is 40 times top line revenue. Nobody's going to buy that company for 40 times. Why should I buy 40 times top? Right?
Yeah. So it's a real rapid cycle is what you're saying. It's a start the company, get it going, hence the name startup. And then relatively rapidly within 5 years, when you think that it's the optimal time to sell, not too early, not too late, move on to the next idea, basically.
Yeah, I mean, my sweet spot, so I've done real large transactions, but the best ones are like 50 million, between 25 and 50 million. When you get over 50 million, the CEO, usually the management team, can't handle a business that big. So you have a lot of problems. You saw this with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. Everybody has to have a CEO in there to train a lot of times the entrepreneur doesn't make it past that. That's one thing. The other thing is that there's I think of it like a river. There's like this big river, and on the other side is companies that are over 50. And on your side, there are companies worth 50 million. When you step in that river, you're committed. Now you have to go for the distance. And when you do that, you're taking a risk on overvaluation, you're taking risks on market conditions changing, and you're taking risks on competitors. So a typical technology competitor can catch up with somebody in 3 years. So if you think about this, and that's Series C to exit, is it? So why? Well, first of all, you put yourself on the radar. As soon as you start selling and as soon as you start becoming successful, there are second mover, third mover, fourth mover, fifth mover people that come on board and compete against you. And they're going to catch up with you way faster than you did the first time. It's like you're chopping through the jungle, and then some other guy just runs up behind you and waits until it's a good time to pass. Right? So this happens all the time, right? So entrepreneurs don't realize that just because you have a head start, all you have to do is have some entrepreneur who somehow sold investors to raise a ton of cash, and they will just smoke right past you using what you taught them. So if it takes 3 years from Series Seed is where you start to do your go-to-market strategy and get on the radar. If you sell in 3 years, you don't end up having to face that situation. If you sell after that, then you run into the scenario of people coming up behind you saying, hey, I mean, look at MySpace and Facebook and Yahoo and Google. I mean, you could go around the world 10 times and find scenarios where this happened. It's not the first mover. Everybody thinks it's the first mover. It's only the first mover if you sell before the second guy comes up behind you. Otherwise, she's going to pass you and eat your breakfast with a little extra capital. Or you raise a ton of money and then you overvalue your company. I mean, it gets to a point where it's just like becomes more messy, it's just messy. But if you can get your business to like 5 years, especially if you've planned it that much, you make 50 million. And remember, it's not how much you sell your business for, it's how much you take home. A lot of people that go, I'm going to sell for 100 million. I'm like, yeah, but what if you take home $1 million because of dilution? It's all about how much you take home.
Now, you've done this so often, and you're talking about when to sell, but what about when to start? I mean, getting those angel investors, how do you identify investors early on? How do you get them excited about your project? How do you get them to see your vision?
Well, I can tell you that 97% of new founders do either family and friends rounds, what I call community, which is family and friends rounds, and crowdfunding. And crowdfunding works really well too. So you can start out with your idea and crowdfunding, get the thing to the point where you can do a pre-seed round, and then accelerators will introduce you to investors. But you need to be careful because not all accelerators are traded the same. I mean, I have talked to some accelerators that are oddly enough completely opposed to their entrepreneurs being introduced to other ways of looking at business, right? And then there are accelerators that are open to everything. Like, well, let me see what you have. Let me learn more. Let me learn more. It's odd. A lot of them surprise me because their job is to serve the entrepreneur, to help the entrepreneur and raise capital. But a lot of times you talk to them and you ask them about their curriculum, and it's the same. They just stole the curriculum from some other accelerators. They're all using the same curriculum. And that is very concerning to me because 90% of entrepreneurs fail within a year of leaving an accelerator. So, you have to, you just follow the dots, right? And you go, well, obviously they're not, that's been going on now for 10 years and it stays the same. So you have to ask yourself. So if I was an entrepreneur, I would interview the accelerators. They think they're interviewing you, but you need to interview them too. Right? You need to make sure, like, what is their curriculum? If you've been to learn from them, and the investors is another piece, right? So what kind of investors they have, why are their investors different than other investors? At what stage do they introduce them, and how do they introduce them? Because they'll say, oh yeah, we introduce you, and it's just pitch competitions. Mm-hmm. And then the entrepreneur has like 3 minutes to pitch an investor. It's hardly enough time to get interest. So I'd be very careful about what they teach, how they get you introduced to the investors, and start out with crowdfunding and family and friends.
Now, how important is track record? Obviously, you've done this dozens of times with great success. When you come with an idea, people are basically going to follow you because you've proven that you do this better than anyone else. Now, how important is it for someone who's a brand new entrepreneur? They've done a couple startups, the first 2 or 3 failed. How much of a knock is that if you don't have a proven track record?
It's not at all. It's actually really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting because the data shows that a successful entrepreneur, somebody who has previously been successful, still only has a 30% chance.
Wow.
Somebody who has not been successful has an 18% chance. So just because you've been successful, you still only have a 30% chance. You got a 70% failure rate. So, you really have to think to yourself about that, right? I think it's more important to be able to explain to the investor, if you haven't been successful, the things you have learned. Most investors understand that a first-time entrepreneur who's never done a startup before is going to have a rough road, and you're going to have to work with them and help them along the way. I think of it, I call it the horse and the jockey, right? So, you invest in the horse, which is the business. You invest in the entrepreneur, which is the jockey. And I always tell investors, I'm like, invest in the horse, not the jockey, because the jockey's never ridden a horse before. So it doesn't matter what kind of horse you give them. They jump off, they're going to fall off a few times, right? It takes a lot of experience. Usually the amount of experience you need to reduce the risk is enough that they won't need you as an investor because they've been successful before. The fact that somebody needs you means that you need to focus on the horse. So when I talk to entrepreneurs, I'm like, listen, they need to know that you can execute the plan. They need to know that you can ride the horse. And they need to understand more than anything that the horse is a good horse. That's the big thing. Because, if you have a situation where you invest in a really good, product business model, then after that, if the entrepreneur fails and goes away or whatever happens, you still have a business and you just bring in another CEO and the investors feel safer with that. But if you tell them, this is your idea and everything is in your head, then you are the liability point. Knowing that you are a human and a first-time entrepreneur is going to make that seem more risky. But if you convince them that the business is a really good business and anybody could run it, they're going to invest in you and they're going to give you a chance to see how far you can take it.
Interesting. Now you clearly know how to inspire people. That's been a large part of your success, doing this over and over again. Explain the type of leadership that it takes to be successful in a startup company, and what does leadership mean to you in that role?
The first thing is I tell people is I'm like a leader, you have to be able to follow before you can lead. So, you are never the head of anything, right? Even when you're the CEO, the customers sit above you, the board of directors sits above you. Even the board of directors has the customers, right? So the customers are the leader of the business. And second to that are the employees, right? So you have to follow before you can lead. That's one thing. The other thing I think about when I think about leadership is understanding the difference between principle and position. So you never want, as a doctor, I'm sure you see this all the time, where you're focused on the best outcome, not your way of doing something, right? So what I always tell people is I say, listen, act like the ideas are all in a cup, and you don't even know which one is yours, and you judge them all the same. So it's not about doing it the way you want to do it. It's about doing it in the way that's going to create the best outcome. And that's principle over position. The next thing I say is doing the right thing and doing things right are not the same thing. So you can be doing the wrong thing right and lead yourself in the bad direction. So that's why I mentioned the North Star, because in the beginning, most of the time, people are doing things right, but they're not doing the right thing in the first place. And so they work really hard and they execute and everything's going along plan, except for they're in the wrong place at the end of the day. So it's like, let's say you're crossing the ocean and you're 1 degree off, you're going to end up in a different continent. And a 5-year stretch is like, going across the ocean. So making sure that your compass is set on the destination you want to go, which is in the North Star, is critical. You think of a business, it's like a GPS. You have where you are and you have where you want to go, right? So you have these two places, and in between is the plan. And it has time, and it has, if there's detours, it has all that stuff baked into it. So you have to see your business like this GPS, which obviously you have to know where you're going when you start. Otherwise, it's like going on vacation without a destination. You just jump in the car and go. I mean, that's not going to be any fun, right? So I tell everybody, I say, listen, it's really important that you understand where you are and you understand where you're going, and that's what the North Star does. And then the plan is everything in the middle, right? And you execute according to that plan, but you're always generally directionally correct.
I mean, that's a great lesson for life. I mean, just forget business, forget medicine, forget law.
Yeah.
That's just a great kind of life motto. You've been so ultra successful in such a competitive and tough market. What would you say is the number one reason for your success? Tough question. Sorry.
That is a tough question. No, I don't know if the listeners know, but I have autism.
I was going to get into that. I was going to talk about what you've overcome in your life and how, but you can get into that as well.
Yeah. So I can talk about it. So, I mean, I think the uniqueness that I have is that I don't have the same level of emotions that a lot of people do. So when failure doesn't feel like failure to me. It just feels like one lesson along the way. So if you fail at something and you think to yourself, oh, I'm glad I got that out of the way now, and now I can take another step on the ladder, right? And I know that the step that I just took is stable now. And so what I do is I don't think of failure as failure. I think of failure as a step, as a step to success, right? And if you're stuck on a treadmill, you just have to move faster and you'll get past, right? So, my mom used to tell me, if you're going through hell, keep going. So, the one thing I think is that the way that you determine success and how your inner dialogue with success is really fundamental. I think at the same time, I use a lot of algorithms to figure things out. So everything I do is sort of calculated. And so when I go into a business, I look at the business in terms of different pieces. So there are 4 functional areas in the tech business, right? So there's product and engineering, there's service and service delivery, that's service and support and all that stuff. And then shared services, that's like operational and sales and marketing. So there are 4 quadrants that you need to focus on. Each one of those quadrants have both leading and lagging indicators that help you understand where the business is. So this is the GPS, right? So if you understand that the value drivers, the things that are going to change your valuation drivers, growth, margin, retention, margin goes with operations, right? Growth goes with sales and marketing, retention goes with service delivery, and product engineering goes across all four. So now you understand who is accountable for what part of the business. And then underneath that, you put both leading indicators, which are things that create financial success, and lagging indicators, which are financial success.
Wow.
And then you measure the business based on that performance, right? So essentially, you're just looking at the business. It talks to you, but you have to understand how to speak the language. So the way that I translate the feeling or the language of the business is through valuation drivers and leading and lagging indicators. And then it just talks to you. It'll tell you it's tired. It'll tell you when it's ready to go. You know, it just talks to you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still just trying to get over what you said initially, and I want to focus on that because it's such an amazing message for all our listeners. Your success is due in large part to your autism, such that you interpret failure as a step forward. That is unbelievable. And that's just such a great take-home point, is that failure is not necessarily a step back. Failure is an opportunity to learn, and it's a way to move forward. And I could not agree more. So that's wonderful to hear. Who are your role models, Greg? Who inspired you growing up?
There's Richard Branson, there's Elon Musk, and Steve Jobs hanging on my wall. All of them are on some kind of a spectrum. And I like Bill Gates too, but Stephen Covey, I think, is amazing. He did 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Dr. Dennis Waitley was really good. But there's on a high level, there is no single entrepreneur that I thought of and said to myself, this person is the best. There's aspects of them, right? So Steve Jobs was like an incredible visionary and a really good storyteller, and people just wanted to follow him, you know? And Elon Musk is the opposite. Elon Musk is just horrible of that stuff, but the guy is a friggin' genius, and he executes. He gets things done. He says, I'm going to go to space, and he builds a rocket company. You know, he says, I'm going to change the way transportation will change, and he builds Tesla, and then he builds sustainable energy, and then the tunnel, you know, the boring company, you know, and the Hyperloop and this stuff. So he just focuses on something and executes. That I have a lot of respect for. I think there's so many people that just hype things instead of just put their nose down and execute and show by example, instead of, you know, just talk around their failures and their successes. Just analyze them and bring them to the surface. You know,
I mean, now is there a single unifying characteristic? You just mentioned, 3 or 4 legendary entrepreneurs. Is there a single unifying characteristic between, Bezos, Steve Jobs, Branson? Is there one thing that you could kind of tie them all together?
Yes, I think the one thing is that that thing I brought up about success. They measure success based on the obstacles they overcome along the way. It's not a destination for them, it's a journey. And every day is success. And I always tell people, I'm like, celebrate the small successes because they add up, right? So I think that is a key. And then the other thing, I really believe this, I really do believe this. It sounds a little cheesy, but I started meditating to help with the autism, to kind of calm me sometimes. And I was able to get to the point where I would just focus on one thing, right? And then that one thing would become what I sort of organically started to notice things change just based on sort of depositing that thought in my brain. I think that the other thing is that you can't focus on money. Money is an outcome. It's not a goal, right? You make money by helping other people, not by helping yourself. So, when you find a problem that you can solve, when you solve that problem, you become successful, because that's what startups are. You solve problems. The bigger the problem, the better the opportunity, right? So if you can find a good problem and you can focus on that good problem, the outcome is money. So don't focus on money. That's another thing. And then the last thing I would say is, you know, for many years, I was so hard on myself, you know, because I grew up with people telling me that I was, you know, stupid all the time and stuff. So you know, your inner dialogue, you know, people hear when I was learning about autism and synesthesia and all these things that I have, the person I was talking to, she said, you know, what I want you to do is I don't want you to think about a carrot. And she's like, what's the first thing you thought? It was a carrot. She says, that's your inner dialogue. Don't think that you don't hear yourself. And I changed that, you know, and that really made a difference. You know, even just telling myself things made a difference, you know, because, you know, don't treat yourself badly, but you wouldn't treat your friend like that. And you sure should be your own friend.
Wow. Greg, I could tell you that I could literally talk to you for hours. I'm going to have to stop this conversation, but what you're saying is unbelievably inspirational. And forget about startup companies, forget about, you know, any particular profession. It's just incredibly motivational for life in general. And so, you know, thanks for all you do. Unbelievable story. And you motivate all of us, including myself. This has been great. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's very kind of you, and thank you for having me on your show and everything. I really appreciate it.
Well, Greg, listen, it's our pleasure. I'm going to have you back because I need to talk to you more. It's truly inspirational and everything you do. And, you know, congrats on all your success. Truly, you're like a role model for anyone who's had any type of difficulty in life, talking about overcoming it, and not only overcoming it, but becoming the best in the world at what you do. That's unbelievable. So again, congratulations, man.
Thank you so much.
All right, buddy. Have a great day.
You too. Have a good day, everybody. Okay, bye.
Take care.